Yeah, we can start. So, thanks everyone for joining for yet another webinar by Tax Mantra Global. This is Alok Patnia, Managing Partner at Tax Mantra Global. I have got Rahul Agarwala with me. He is a partner and he is head of South India practice. We are a global tax and legal firm based out of India, Singapore, and US. We do regular webinars for our clients to and for also for businesses at large to ensure that they are well updated on what's happening in their field in taxation. Today, in that series, we are again with you, and today we will discuss a very important topic, and it's international transactions with related parties and transfer pricing applicability. Uh, so, someone Mayank Agarwal, Mayank, you can put your message in the chat box, and we will reply. So if you have any queries, you can put your message on the chat box and we will be more than happy to reply to your query. So as I was saying that transfer pricing is very important. I will also talk few things in Hindi for our businesses. So आज हम ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग पे ये वेबिनार करेंगे. ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग वो होता है, एक लॉ होता है जिसको हमें फॉलो करना पड़ता है जब कोई रिलेटेड पार्टी के बीच में ट्रांजेक्शन होता है. तो विद दिस आई हैंड ओवर to Rahul for the presentation. Rahul, over to you.
Thanks, Alok. Good evening, everyone. So today we are talking about transactions which are mostly with related and associated enterprise transactions which happen between the group entities, and mainly these are related to international transactions and certain specified domestic transactions. So first we'll discuss the background. So usually when we do commercial transactions between two independent parties, the transactions are usually driven by market forces, demand, supply, the value the person is adding, the nature of supply. There are various market factors which come into play, and the market factors then determine the best price for the product or the service which is being transacted, and the transaction happens as per the negotiation between the two parties, prevailing market conditions and all. However, when the commercial transactions, they happen within a group, and especially when it is a multinational group with several entities across different nations, having different tax laws, having different jurisdictions, having different governments, then the transactions between two related parties, two companies or entities or persons within the same group, then such transactions cannot be considered same as it would be for an independent transaction wherein the market forces would shape the relationship between the two parties and the transactions. So when one party transfers to another a good or a service for a price, and in general that is known as transfer price. However, here the transfer pricing refers to transactions between two entities, two enterprises which are related in one way or the other, and the transaction is not independent. So there are chances that in such transactions wherein group companies, group entities are involved, the price may be arbitrary and dictated. It may have or may not have relevance to the cost, value added, and the market forces in play. So therefore, the transfer price represents the value of goods or services between independently operating units of an organization, and the transfer pricing generally refers to the prices of transaction between associated enterprise. We'll come to the definition of associated enterprise. There is a detailed definition as per the Income Tax Act. And when the transaction happens between associated enterprise, it's usually known as transfer pricing. So usually there is a value attached to transfers of goods and services. It may be transfer of goods, services, technology, assets, anything between two entities. And if it were a unrelated transaction, uncontrolled transaction, there would be a margin. However, in case of related or associated parties, the margin can be controlled, and it may not be driven by independent market forces. So we'll understand this with a simple example. So suppose there is a company A, and company A purchases goods for rupees 100 and sells it to its associated company B in another country.
I think, Rahul, should we first understand the definition of associated enterprise? Then we can come back to this question.
Will come. So associated enterprise definition is a detailed definition. So this is a very simple example. I'll just take through it. So for instance, if it were a independent transaction, it would be a 400 rupee transaction, wherein the goods or the service has a market value of say 400 rupee. However, if there are multiple entities within a group, so for example, company A transfer it to its related associated company B in another country for 200 rupee, purchases for 100, transfers it for 200, and then the another company B transfers it to company C at 400 and making a 200 rupee profit. So in this case, company A and the country in which company A is located gets 100 profit, and the company B and the country in which it is located gets 200 rupee profit. So there can be a scenario where country A is a high tax jurisdiction and country B is a low or a nil tax jurisdiction. It can be a tax haven also. So in this case, because of the relationship between the parties and control over the transaction, the profits have been split between different entities and different countries, and that could impact the tax and revenue of one country. Wherein all the transactions, maybe in this example, if company A is the company located in a country where all the operations are happening, where all the development is happening, in this case, and if it is a high tax jurisdiction country, the profits can be very minimum here, and it can be moved to a higher lower tax jurisdiction country, which may impact the revenue. And that is why there is a requirement of transfer pricing regulation.
Okay.
So again, transfer pricing transactions can happen between two entities who are in the nature of holding subsidiary relationship. They can be independent, like they can be entities who are not in the nature of holding subsidiary relationship. However, because of certain level of control, certain level of cross-holding, still it can be covered under the transfer pricing definition. We'll discuss this in detail later.
Okay. So what you are saying in nutshell is that जब कोई transaction unrelated party में होता है, so there are unrelated party with unrelated, and there is no influence. So then the pricing is determined in a normal market rate, in an independent market rate.
Yes.
But the challenge is that when there are international groups, for example, Apple having its manufacturing entity in India, in US, in different countries, and when there are transactions between these group entities, how do you, at what price do you transfer goods or services? What is the arm's length price? So क्योंकि वो ग्रुप के अंदर होता है, देयर आर चांसेस कि ग्रुप जो है उसको मैनिपुलेट कर ले बहुत बार या सही प्राइसिंग पे ट्रांसफर नहीं हो, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट वन कंट्री माइट सफर tax erosion or tax evasion, what you may call it, what you want to it, and because of that the transfer pricing provision was brought in, जिससे क्या है कोई टैक्स इरोजन ना हो सके, किसी भी कंट्री का टैक्स बेस इरोड ना हो. अगर कोई ट्रांजेक्शन पे इंडियन बिजनेसेस, अगर इंडियन बिजनेसेस को किसी ट्रांजेक्शन पे 20-25% का मार्जिन होना चाहिए था, कि क्योंकि वो खाली ग्रुप कंपनी की एंटिटी है इसलिए वो लॉस में हो जा रहा है या 5% में हो रहा है, वो नहीं होना चाहिए. सो आई थिंक इन नटसेल transfer pricing are laws which determines and which involves controlling prices in a determined manner within the associated enterprises so that no country should lose the tax base or tax which it demands, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, okay.
So again, we are going through certain definitions under the transfer pricing laws, which are as per the Income Tax Act 1961. And there are certain definitions, like India has entered into a double taxation avoidance agreement and information sharing agreements with several countries across the globe. And there are certain definitions in respective double taxation avoidance agreements also.
Okay.
So income tax, the definition as per the income tax laws are Income Tax Act as a standard definition. We have taken those definitions, and the respective when two entities between two countries are transacting, they can refer to the Income Tax Act, and they can also refer to the double taxation avoidance agreement between the countries. And the definition which is mentioned over there, there can be slight change in definition as per the different agreements with different countries. And whatever is more beneficial to the entities, those definition can be taken. Usually the double taxation avoidance agreements, they kind of overrule the Income Tax Act, but the more beneficial provision is what the entities are allowed to take. So so arm's length price means a price which is applied or proposed to be applied in a transaction between person other than associated enterprises in uncontrolled conditions. So for any transaction, be it sale, supply of service, goods, assets, properties, intangible assets, anything, the arm's length price is what an uncontrolled price, a market-driven price would be for that particular transaction. So the basic principle of transfer pricing laws says that the transaction, even in the between two associated enterprises and related enterprises, should also be at the arm's length price, which is acceptable in a normal uncontrolled market conditions. So then we have a very important definition of permanent establishment, a PE. So permanent establishment in general includes a fixed place of business through which the business of the enterprise is wholly or partly carried on. So if an entity has a fixed place of business through which the transactions are happening, or the business is carried on wholly or partly in some another country, that place of business is usually considered as a permanent establishment. Here we are talking about transactions, and transaction includes any arrangement, understanding, or action in concert, whether or not such arrangement, understanding, or action is formal or in writing, or whether or not such. So it means the arrangement, the agreement, it can be formal, it can be in writing, it can be in form of a contract, it can be an oral arrangement. And so any such arrangement or any such supply of goods or services is considered as transaction under the transfer pricing laws.
Okay, okay.
Then we'll,
I think
yeah.
now this is the most critical part. और बहुत लोगों को ये नहीं सोचना चाहिए कि ये ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग कोई बहुत बड़ी चीज है और हमारे बिजनेस में तो ये लगेगा ही नहीं, या हमारा बिजनेस इम्पैक्ट ही नहीं करेगा. We are a startup, we are a small business, we are just a tech firm. So Rahul will get more in detail into it, but transfer pricing is applicable to everyone who gets into a related party transaction. I think associated enterprise is very critical to understand who are your related or associated enterprises. Yeah, Rahul.
So the relationship of an associated enterprise is defined in Section 92A of the Income Tax Act, and it covers direct or indirect participation in the management, control, capital of an enterprise by another enterprise. When one entity has a direct or indirect participation in the management of another company, has control over the another company, or has invested in the equity or capital of another entity, they all in general gets covered under the definition of associated enterprise. It also covers situations in which the same person directly or indirectly participates in the management, control, or capital of both the enterprises. For instance, Mr. A, if he has invested 70% in one company in India and another 70% or 60% in another company in the United States, as it is controlled and owned directly by the same person, the two entities, they become associated enterprise. So for the purpose of above definition, the certain specific parameters have been laid down based on which two enterprise would be deemed as associated enterprise. We'll go through some of the parameters. So direct or indirect holding of 26% or more voting power in an enterprise by another enterprise or in both the enterprises by the same person. So the controlling stake, which is defined as 26%. So if an entity owns 26% or more equity in another entity or voting power in another entity, the two entities become associated enterprise. Similarly, if it is it has common shareholding, both the entities have a common shareholder, then also they become associated enterprise. Second is advancement of loan by an enterprise that constitutes 51% or more of the total book value of the assets of the borrowing enterprise. So now if there is an enterprise which has taken loan from another enterprise and the loan quantum constitutes 51% or more of the total book value of the asset which the company is having, it means the borrowing entity is directly controlled or indirectly controlled by the lending entity, because the loan provided to another entity is 51% or more of the total assets of the company who has borrowed. So in these cases also both the entities become associated enterprise. Similarly, guarantee of an enterprise of 10% or more of the total borrowing of other enterprise. So if one enterprise, one company guarantees 10% or more of the total borrowing of another entity, be it bank loan, bank guarantee, corporate loan, any kind of loan wherein one entity stands as a guarantor for another entity, and such guarantee is 10% or more of the total borrowing of another entity, both the entities become associated enterprise. Fourth is appointment of an enterprise of more than 50% of the board of directors or one or more executive director of other enterprise, or the appointment of specified directorship of both enterprises by the same person. So now there can be a situation where under an agreement or a contract, so more than 50% of the board of directors are controlled by one enterprise. They have the rights to appoint directors over there, or the directors are appointed as per their direction, or maybe through a same person can have control over two enterprises, where in both the enterprises he commands the control and is able to appoint 50% or more of the board of directors. So in such situation, both these entities, wherein the same person has 50% or more of control over the board of directors, such enterprises are considered as associated enterprise.
Okay.
Next is complete dependence of an enterprise in carrying on its business on the intellectual property licensed to it by other enterprise. Now, for instance, there is a Singapore-based company, and it owns the IP, and there is a Indian entity which is not related through shareholding, which is not maybe related through directorship. It has independent shareholders, it has independent directors, but still the Indian entity is totally reliant on the Singapore entity and has taken or is using the IP of the Singapore-based entity to do its business in India. Then such two enterprises also become associated enterprise, and transfer pricing related provisions applies to such enterprises. Next is substantial purchase of raw materials, sale of manufactured goods by an enterprise from one to another enterprise at prices and conditions influenced by the latter. So if the prices are influenced by one enterprise to another, and the substantial purchase, sale, or manufacture of goods happens under such an agreement or such an influence, then also two enterprises become associated enterprise. There is also a condition of 90%, wherein if purchase, sale, or supply of 90% of a enterprise's purchases or revenue is from another enterprise, the two enterprises are considered as related party and associated enterprises under the transfer pricing laws. There is a general provision mentioned in point number 7, which says the existence of any prescribed relationship of mutual interest, which may be notified by the government from time to time. Then enterprises having individuals or relatives of the individual or HUF or members of the HUF in common. So if they have common shareholding and common directorship, so one enterprise is controlled by or owned by an individual and another enterprise is completely owned by his relatives as defined under the Income Tax Act, then also both the enterprises become associated enterprise. Similarly, if one enterprise is held by a HUF and another by the members of the HUF, both the entities become associated enterprise. So apart from this, in cases of firms, partnership firms, body of individuals, association of persons, so in these kind of quasi bodies, if 10% or more holding is in common, the two entities, they become associated enterprise. So yeah, so this is not an extensive list, but this gives an idea that the definition of associated enterprise is very wide, and it covers. So if any control which we can think of, which would impact the revenue or business of one entity and is controlled by another entity, even by a lesser significance, still the transfer pricing laws, they become applicable. Use of common brand, use of common intellectual property, over dependence on purchase, sale, or supply, 10% or more holding in case of firms and body of individuals and AOPs, relatives, common relatives or individuals having shareholdings. All these scenarios, they make both the entities associated enterprises for the purpose of transfer pricing laws.
Okay.
So I think this was about the definition of associated enterprise. We'll move towards kind of transactions which are covered. So Alok, if you have any views or if you want to take any other points. Yeah.
So as you have explained, the definition of associated enterprise is very comprehensive and very wide. That basically means that it covers a whole lot of various ways in which two enterprises can become associated enterprise. It's not only shareholding, but it can be many other ways wherein दो enterprise जो है वो associated हो जाती है, और अगर associated हो जाती है तब क्या क्या compliances करना पड़ता है वो राहुल आप बताओगे थोड़ी देर में. इसका मतलब ये समझ में आ रहा है कि ये इतना स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड नहीं है कि जब खाली शेयर होल्डिंग ही रहेगा तभी एसोसिएटेड होगा या कॉमन डायरेक्टर होगा तभी से एसोसिएटेड होगा. देयर आर 10 to 15 different parameters which includes dependence on procurement of raw material, dependence on contract, dependent on bank guarantee, board decisions, common holding through HUF. So we have to be very careful to analyze. I think to analyzing who is your associated enterprise is the first step in complying with transfer pricing provisions.
True, Alok. So the Indian transfer pricing laws prescribes that income arising from international transactions and in some cases specified domestic transactions between associated enterprises should be computed having regard to the arm's length price. So this we discussed earlier. So uncontrolled independent transactions happens at arm's length price, and the transfer pricing laws, they prescribe that even if the transactions are between two associated enterprises, they should happen at arm's length price. It has been clarified that any allowance for an expenditure or interest or allocation of any cost or expense arising from an international transaction or specified domestic transaction also shall be determined having regard to the arm's length price. So yeah, any expenditure, allowance of expenditure, any interest, any allocation of expense, cost sharing, anything arising from an international transaction or with regard to specified domestic transaction, they have to be done at an arm's length price. And the Income Tax Act, they define the terms like international transaction, specified domestic transaction, associated enterprise, and arm's length price. We have seen the definition of associated enterprises and arm's length price. We'll see what are considered as international transactions in the next slide, and we'll also see what are covered under specified domestic transactions later.
Okay.
So now the definition of international transaction does includes the following. So any kind of sale, purchase, or lease of tangible or intangible property. So it normally contains all kind of goods, assets, IP rights, tangible or intangible property. So all kind of goods, it covers their sale, purchase, leasing. All kind of transactions are covered under the definition of international transactions. Provision of services, so all kind of services without any exception is covered under the definition and hence covered under the transfer pricing regulations. Any kind of cost sharing arrangements. So there can be cost sharing arrangements wherein common services are utilized, wherein one entity would incur expenses for another entity and then take a reimbursement. So all such sharing arrangements are also covered under the provision of transfer pricing. Any sort of lending or borrowing of money, one entity giving loan to another entity, giving advances. So all these lending and borrowing of money is covered under definition of international transaction and hence transfer pricing. Or then there's a general and a wide definition which says that any other transaction having a bearing on profit, loss, income, or asset of such enterprises, they all are covered under the definition of international transactions and hence transfer pricing provisions.
Okay. Perfect, Rahul. We can move ahead.
The two associated enterprises, they could be two non-residents also. They could be one resident and another non-resident. Also, as we discussed earlier, a permanent establishment of a foreign enterprise shall also qualify as an associated enterprise. So if there's a transaction between a foreign enterprise and its Indian PE, the same is also covered under the transfer pricing provisions. So that is why many companies, they do get specific structuring done through tax and legal firms, so that to ensure that if they have an office in another country or they have an entity in another country, the other country does not become a PE for that enterprise. Otherwise, the transfer pricing laws become applicable. If it does become, then the compliances have to be done, and which many companies they do.
Yeah.
So we'll also talk about specified domestic transactions in detail, because not in detail, but we'll just go through it, that what covers specified domestic transactions, because the transfer pricing rules, the laws, the penalties which we discuss later, they are applicable equally both to the international transactions and specified domestic transactions. So the Indian transfer pricing laws not only prescribes for international transactions, but specified domestic transactions too. So if the aggregate value of such transaction exceeds rupees 20 crore. So if there is a domestic transaction between two associated enterprises and the quantum of such transaction exceeds 20 crore in a year, then the transfer pricing provisions becomes applicable on two enterprises. So if there are two entities in India, wherein one entity is a holding and another is a subsidiary, or maybe is held by the same person, or maybe has a common IP, in all those scenarios, the associated enterprise definition which we discussed earlier, if any of those definition if two entities within India, within the country falls under those definition, and if the aggregate value of transactions between the two entities, they exceed 20 crores, then the transfer pricing laws become applicable on such entities. So what kind of transactions are covered? So any expenditure with respect to which deduction is claimed while computing profit and gains of business or profession. So if there is any expense in the profit and loss account of a company against which it claims deduction, which normally every company does for the expenses incurred, and if those expenses are relatable to any associated enterprise within India and the quantum of transaction exceeds 20 crore, the domestic transfer pricing laws, they apply. Similarly, any transaction related to businesses eligible for profit-linked tax incentives, for example, infrastructure facilities, the entities which are registered under Section 80IA and the SEZs unit which get exemption from taxes under Section 10AA. So the domestic transfer pricing laws applies on such entities, so that the profits of normal business is not diverted towards profit of exempt businesses like infrastructure facilities and SEZs, and any other transaction which may be specified. Here, it is important to note that in for applicability of domestic transfer pricing, there is a limit of 20 crore rupees. However, for applicability of international transfer pricing, there is no limit. So as soon as a transaction between two entities initiates, even if it is for rupee 1, the international transfer pricing laws gets triggered, and the compliances and required documentation have to be done. We'll talk about the threshold limit for the documentation in later slides, but the laws becomes applicable.
What you're saying that in domestic transaction there is a consolidated limit of 20 CR. So if there is a transaction of 20 CR, then only domestic transfer pricing triggers. तो डोमेस्टिक ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग तभी ट्रिगर होता है जब कंसोलिडेटेड ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू जो है वो 20 करोड़ या उससे ज्यादा है. बट यू राइटली सेड दैट इन केस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शंस there is no limit. So even if you have a single rupee transaction with your related party, which is an international transaction, the transfer pricing laws triggers and you need to comply with the provisions.
Exactly, Alok.
Okay.
So now we'll talk about briefly talk about the methods. So there are various methodologies which are internationally acceptable, and Section 92C of the Income Tax Act prescribes these methodologies for determination of arm's length price. That how do you determine the arm's length price for transaction between two associated enterprises? It can be in case of domestic transfer pricing or in case of international transfer pricing. Anything which we are discussing does apply to both the cases. So there is a method called comparable uncontrolled price method. So usually this method becomes applicable when the entity when the selling entity does sales to the associated enterprises also, and also to public at large, and to uncontrolled and unrelated parties under normal business and market scenarios. So in those cases, we have this the option of using this method, wherein the profit margin of uncontrolled prices can be taken into consideration in considering the arm's length price. So we have a resale price method, wherein the second level of sales, when it happens, at what price that is happening, depending upon that, the profit margin which should be there in the initial transaction is determined. We have a cost plus method, wherein cost plus a certain markup is determined and added to the cost of the entity. Usually the cost plus method is utilized in cases of captive units and back offices, wherein it is fully controlled as a subsidiary by the holding company, and it incurs cost and provides 100% of its output to the controlling entity. In those cases, cost plus a certain markup is added, and it's called a cost plus markup method. We have a profit split method, which is applicable usually when the business structure is very complex. There's a common IP, and like allocating cost and allocating profit to two different verticals of transactions, wherein one is with associated and one is with non-associated, becomes very difficult. So there is a profit split method under a formula wherein the profit is split between the two parts of the business. In that case, this is applied, and there is a transactional net margin method, which is kind of a residuary method, wherein if all the four above are not applicable, or if any of them cannot be applied, then the transactional net margin method is applied, wherein the operational cost and operational profit of the entity is determined, and they are then compared to the market net profit of the market comparables, industry comparables in similar industries working in similar circumstances. And there are such other methods as may be prescribed depending upon the nature of business. But usually there are 5 methods which are there. First 4 have to be seen if they can be applied, and if none of them can be applied, then the 5th one, the transactional net margin method, is applied.
Yeah. We can move ahead. So these are 5 methods. You rightly said. We can move ahead to the documentation part.
Yeah. So along with the Income Tax Act, we have income tax rules, and Rule 10D of the income tax rule lists the mandatory documents, information that a taxpayer must maintain. Mostly the taxpayer who gets covered under the definition of transfer pricing laws, and there are transactions between associated enterprises, then they have to maintain. The extensive list under this part includes information on the ownership structure of the company, the overall group profile, of the year. This rule also requires the taxpayer to document a comprehensive transfer pricing study. So there is a transfer pricing study which is carried out, and that has to be documented and kept as record. And the requirement in this respect includes documentation of functions performed, risk assumed, and assets employed. So this is called a FAR analysis, where functions performed, the assets employed, and risk assumed between the two enterprises are analyzed and documented in the transfer pricing study document, so that because depending upon these 3 criteria, profit margin of any entity is determined. So which entity is taking what function, which entity is performing, what risk which entity is taking, and what kind of investment and asset employment which entity is doing. Depending upon that, which entity will command more profit margin shall be determined. Then relevant uncontrolled transactions are analyzed, their comparability analysis is done, benchmarking studies are done. There are certain assumptions, policies, details of adjustment, and explanation as to the selection of most appropriate transfer pricing method. The transfer pricing study also mentions the details of assumptions taken, the policies determined and derived by the entities, and also in the study report, the industry comparables, the profit margins, why a certain comparable was selected and on what basis it was done, which one is the most appropriate transfer pricing method of the 5 methods which we discussed earlier, and why that particular method is applicable in that particular scenario in the transfer pricing study.
Yeah.
The documentation and the rules, the rule 10D has two parts to it. The first part talks about the documentation which has to be maintained, which we discussed in the last slide. And the second part of the rule requires that adequate documentation be maintained that substantiates the information analysis studies documented under the first part. So in the first part, there are certain documents maintained. There is a transfer pricing study made and maintained. And the second part prescribes that there should be backup documents to substantiate the things which have been documented in the first part. The second part also contains a recommended list of such supporting documents, including government publications, reports, studies, technical publications, market research studies undertaken by reputable institutions, price publications, relevant agreements, contracts, and correspondence. So yeah, the second part of the rule also prescribes and has a recommendatory list of the supporting documents which should ideally be maintained. So the research documents, the studies, the government reports, reports from reputable institutions, relevant agreements. So when we talk about relevant agreements, the agreement between the two associated enterprises, they become very, very important. So there should be a intercompany service agreement, or we also call it a master service agreement between the two entities, which is drawn up, and the agreement gives a lot of insight about a lot of things between the two associated enterprise, the transactions which are happening between the two related parties and two associated enterprise. So when we talk about the FAR analysis, the function performed, asset employed, and the risk assumed, so that comes out from the agreement between the two entities to a large extent. Also the terms of payment, the kind of risk which entity is assuming, and the deliverables the entities are having. So all these have an impact on the transfer pricing study report, and also in case of any scrutiny done by the income tax department. So these agreements are equally important part of the documentation. The transfer pricing study report is very important, comparables are very important, and agreements and contracts between the entities involved are also very, very important.
Yeah, Rahul.
So we'll talk about the threshold limit for maintenance of the documentation. So taxpayers having international transaction below the prescribed threshold of 1 crore and specified domestic transactions below the threshold of 20 crores are relieved from maintaining the prescribed documentation. So the documentation which we discussed in the last 2 to 3 slides, they are usually not applicable for international transactions below 1 crore and domestic transactions below 20 crores. However, even in these cases, it is very, very important that the documentation maintained should be adequate to substantiate the arm's length price of the international transactions. So by this, so there is a threshold limit of 1 crore for international transactions. However, the second part of it, which says that even if documentation are not required to be maintained, still there should be adequate substantiation of the arm's length price. So even if transactions are below 1 crore, in case of any scrutiny or audit conducted by the income tax department, they'll ask us to ask the entities to substantiate the arm's length price. And to substantiate the arm's length price, again, the documentation which we discussed earlier and the transfer pricing study report, the agreements, the contracts, all these things become
very important.
Otherwise, yes. So even for transactions below 1 crore, these are kind of recommendatory in nature, even if not mandatory. Above 1 crore or more, it's a mandatory, but below 1 crore also it is recommended. So again, this threshold should not be confused with the applicability of transfer pricing laws. The transfer pricing laws become applicable with a single rupee of transaction with associated enterprise in case of international transactions. But there is some relief on documentation maintenance up to 1 crore, and 1 crore and above, it is mandatory.
Yeah. It is self-explanatory. Yeah.
prescribed documentation and information have to be contemporaneously maintained to the extent possible and must be in place by the due date of the tax return filing. So there can be questions that if we do the transfer pricing study once, or if we do the agreement once, will that suffice for all the years to come? So actually, that is not the case. The comparables, the market study, the market analysis has to be done on a year-to-year basis. The latest analysis, latest study, and latest documentation are required. So documentation for each and every year, the proper working, the markup working, the comparables from where they have been taken, all those have to be maintained on year basis. And usually they should be in place before the due date for the filing of the tax returns. And like usually for companies, the due date, and for audited entities, the due date for filing of tax return is 30th September, but wherever the transfer pricing provisions become applicable, there is an extended due date, wherein the due date for return filing gets extended till 30th of November of the relevant assessment year. So whenever there is a due date before that, the documentation should ideally be in place. And there is also a time limit for maintaining the prescribed documents. The prescribed document should be maintained for a period of 9 years from the end of the relevant tax year, and must be updated annually on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Apart from the documentation to be maintained, so there is a mandatory transfer pricing audit or a chartered accountant's report in form 3CB, which has to be filed. So it is mandatory for all taxpayers without exception to obtain an independent chartered accountant's report in respect of all international transactions between associated enterprise or specified domestic transactions. So
And this is even for 1 rupee transaction. So this audit under Form 3CB is mandatory if you have any international transaction or any specified domestic transaction. In case of international transaction, I think it's even for 1 rupee you have to do this Form 3CB.
Yes, in international transaction there is no limit. The limit of 1 crore is only for documentation, but not for chartered accountant's report. The chartered accountant's report becomes applicable even for rupee 1 transaction between two associated enterprises if it is an international transaction. And for specified domestic transaction, we have the exemption limit of up to 20 crores. So if it exceeds that limit, then this compliance is required.
Okay.
Further, this report has to be furnished by the due date of tax return filing. So in case of transfer pricing applicability, the return filing due date is 30th of November. So before the return filing, the chartered accountant's report in Form 3CB has to be filed with the income tax department.
Very similar to the way we 3CD is done for tax audit.
Yes. And the form of the report has been prescribed. The format of the report has been prescribed, and it's available online. The filings are online nowadays with the digital signatures of the chartered accountant and the company. And the report requires the accountant to give an opinion on the proper maintenance of prescribed documents and information by the taxpayer. Furthermore, the accountant is required to certify the correctness of an extensive list of prescribed particulars. So all those certifications and confirmations have to be done by the chartered accountant in the Form 3CB related to the applicability of transfer pricing, the maintenance of the documentation, and the correctness and completion of the things which have been maintained.
Yeah.
So in normal circumstances also, the income tax department conducts scrutiny wherein based on the internal guidelines of the income tax department and internal circulars issued, the department does select certain cases for detailed or limited scrutiny. So similarly, the scrutiny in cases where transfer pricing becomes applicable, the scrutiny of the transfer pricing angle also becomes applicable. So earlier in certain cases, the scrutiny was done by the corporate tax assessing officer only, and only above a certain prescribed limit, it was referred to specialized transfer pricing officer, because the transfer pricing officers are specialized officer who are aware about the transfer pricing laws and are better placed to determine the arm's length price and analyze the uh, documentation which have been maintained. However, recently, I think in sometime in 2016, the government confirmed that all the cases where transfer pricing is applicable shall, and if there is a scrutiny or a audit from the income tax department, the cases have to be referred to the transfer pricing officer. There are certain internal guidelines which says the scenarios in which mandatory selection of scrutiny shall happen. Usually mandatory selection shall happen when 15 crore or more of transaction happens between two associated enterprise. And usually the TPO, the reference to TPO used to happen when 5 crore or more of international transactions used to happen between two associated enterprise. However, this has been recently amended, and there's an internal circular that in all the cases the TPO will be referred and the assessing officer will not comment on the TP related provisions.
Yeah, yeah. This is a very important amendment which has come in.
So I will go through the penalties for non-compliance. So what kind of penalties and charges the income tax department can charge. So for failure to maintain the prescribed information and documents, 2% of the transaction value is what can be charged. Then for failure to furnish the information documents during audit, another 2% of the transaction value. If the documents required during the audit and scrutiny are not furnished, 2% of the transaction value can be charged as a penalty. For failure to disclose any transaction in CA report, again 2% of the transaction value. Any transaction which was there but still not reported in the CA's report in Form 3C we discussed in the last slide, 2% of the transaction value can be charged. And all these three are exclusive. Like there can be scenarios where all three of these are imposed, so which can make it to 6% of the transaction value. Then, in case of if after the scrutiny or audit conducted by the income tax department, if there is any adjustment to the taxpayer income on account of transfer pricing adjustments, and the income is added, that the total taxable income of the person is added, so there can be a penalty of 100 to 300% on the total tax on the adjusted amount, which is added to the income. So this is again in addition to the penalties we discussed earlier, the 2% penalties. And for failure to furnish the chartered accountant's report in Form 3CB, there is a penalty prescribed of 1 lakh rupee.
So Rahul, I have a question by Bineet Desai. He is asking who can prepare the transfer pricing study and where we can obtain those transfer pricing study. So Bineet, transfer pricing studies are being done by specialized transfer pricing professionals because it would involve uh, collating data from different sources. It will also involve understanding your industry and finding out comparables. So this is a specialized role, and there are firms which are specialized in transfer pricing practice. For instance, we also do lot of transfer pricing studies. So if you have any requirement, we can help you in that. Yeah, Rahul.
Do we have any other questions as of now?
No, no, no.
Okay, okay. So I think we have one more topic left. We'll cover that, and then we can
Open
have.
for the question answers. Yeah.
So we'll talk about briefly about the safe harbor rules. So these rules, Section 92 CB was introduced sometime in 2012-13 in the Income Tax Act, and as per the definition, the safe harbor are the circumstances under which the income tax authorities shall accept the transfer pricing declared by the SSC. So if someone is covered under the safe harbor rules, then in those cases the transactions between the associated enterprises shall not be questioned by the income tax authorities, and it shall be accepted. So the rule provides minimum operating profit margin in relation to operating expense a taxpayer is expected to earn for certain categories of international transactions. So as per the rules, there are certain categories of international transactions which are specified, and they have also specified certain percentage of operating profit and net profit which the enterprise should maintain. In some cases, it's the specific percentage mentioned. In some cases, they have mentioned a range. And if profit of above the range or within the range and above the equal to or above the percentage prescribed in the rules are kind of maintained by the company, and they intimate the same to the jurisdictional officer through the route provided by the transfer pricing authorities, they get covered under the safe harbor rules. And in those cases, so the rule provides acceptable norms for certain categories of financial transactions, such as intra-group loans made or guarantees provided to non-resident affiliates or an Indian taxpayer. So it's an optional rule which is available. So if the conditions of the rules are met, and the prescribed margin is maintained, then the department accepts the declaration made by the company and does not take it into detailed audit and scrutinies. So to be clear, the safe harbor rules are not arm's length prices, but it is more in the nature of presumptive taxation, which generally enthuse taxpayers to opt for same as a compromise for not having to be involved in protracted litigation. So the transfer pricing studies, the transfer pricing documentation, the markups which are maintained, the profit margin, which the operating profit which the company maintains, at times are litigated, and it's litigated for long, both by the department and at times by the taxpayers. So the taxpayer, if they want to buy peace of mind and avoid all kind of litigation, they can pay a premium wherein the profit margin declared is a bit higher as compared to what they would be already declaring, and as per the safe harbor rules and meeting the conditions of the safe harbor rule, so they can keep themselves away from the protracted litigation, and whatever is declared under the safe harbor rules shall be acceptable to the department. So again, safe harbor are broadly in two forms. One is outright exclusion by setting threshold. So, and another is by way of simplification of provisions by designating range within which prices profit should fall. So there are two kind of rules which are available: outright threshold limit and range based limits. So rules 10TA to 10TG of the income tax rules, they contain the procedure for adopting the safe harbor rules, and the transfer prices to be adopted accordingly, and the compliances procedures to be followed to get covered under the safe harbor provisions have to be done. Eligible international transactions and applicable safe harbor transfer pricing price is subject to ceiling circumstances as may be prescribed in the relevant rules. Like for instance, for software development services and IT/ITES with low risk and up to a turnover limit of 500 crore, a margin of 20% or more of the operating cost has been prescribed. So if there is a IT/ITES company and a software development company, and it's a low risk entity, and as per the FAR analysis which we do, and the turnover is up to 500 crore, the safe harbor rule prescribes a profit margin of 20% or more. So if that is maintained and the procedures and the requirements as per the rules are fulfilled, the entity can continue to disclose at 20% of profit and be free from all the legal hassles and scrutiny and audits from the income tax department.
So Rahul, when you summarize, let me know. I have a couple of questions.
Yes, I think that's it. That's it from my side.
So there is one query from Beneath Desai again. He's saying that will there be one transfer pricing study applicable accepted for two different jurisdictions? So what I understand from him is that a company having related party in two different jurisdictions. So it depends. So a transfer pricing study can be a comprehensive study which may include a different set of related party transactions depending on the methods you use. So I think you can have a comprehensive transfer pricing study.
I
Second
think
is
analysis is required to see that how comparable both the units are.
yes,
So when we are
yes.
talking about units, how different or similar they are, the nature of transaction which they are doing with the associated enterprise, how different or similar they
So
are. Quantum,
benchmark. So benchmark. So you have to do so different benchmarks, but it can include in a same report which will have the other overall basic functions as same.
yeah,
But
but if the two units are very different or the scale at which they operate are very different, then separate studies and separate documentation
is
will
advised.
be
Yeah,
required.
yeah, yeah. And uh, Bala Sundar is saying why is operating profit margin related to operating expense and not operating income? I'm not very clear what he's trying to ask. Do you understand his query?
Yeah, so when we talk about profit margin, it has to be determined based on the expense only because revenue is something which is into question. That is why the transfer pricing laws are being applied. So revenue is the revenue actually showing the correct profit or not is something under question, and that is why the expenses are taken as a base to compute the arm's length price and the profits.
Yeah, yeah. So, as we were discussing, I was also discussing initially that transfer pricing is very important, and there is a lot of focus by government on transfer pricing, and more so for small and medium-sized businesses because they feel that transfer pricing is not applicable to them. So you have to be very clear that if you have any transaction with any of your related parties, and then you have to do all the compliances which are there under the law for the transfer pricing. I think that's how we summarize this. So you have to be careful in terms of understanding what kind of related party transactions you have. We do have full-fledged transfer pricing practice. uh, Tax Mantra is a global tax and legal firm, as I said earlier, and we have in India we have offices in Bangalore, Kolkata, and Mumbai. This sheet is not updated, and then we have global delivery centers also. So do get in touch with us, and we will share this video with you again. And if you have any queries on transfer pricing or an international transaction, do come to us, and we will be more than happy to help you. And with this,
Thanks, Alok. Thank you
thanks,
for
Rahul, for a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. And thanks everyone for joining in. Uh, just a second. I will just ping my email ID. So if you have any queries, you can write in. So thanks again. Normally every day at 5 p.m. we have webinars. And if you want to attend next webinars, you can go to our website and go and attend and register yourself for the webinar. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for taking out time. Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for people who have watched us on social media on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And thanks till and bye till the time we meet again. Thanks, Rahul.
Alok. Thank you.
Thanks.